Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me? No? You can? Okay, perfect. I'm Victoria. I'm an active reloader since 2012, co-founder of Paved, which is a marketplace that matches business development talent with companies based on their skills. And I've been actively involved with the Greek startup ecosystem, particularly as I did my thesis at Cambridge, and I examined how new ventures can create identities in constrained environments and compete with ecosystems such as Silicon Valley. Today I'll be moderating the event, the topic of which is startups that are built to last. And we really couldn't have had this discussion without the co-founders and the executive directors of Hellas Direct. Now, I'll do a bit of an introduction of Hellas Direct, and the founders themselves, Alexis and Emilios, will talk more about this. But Hellas Direct is a digital-first, full-stack insurance company which uses cutting-edge technology and artificial intelligence. It was founded in 2015 and is backed by the likes of IFC and Third Point LLC, and is in a long-term partnership with Swiss Reassurance. Now, what's quite impressive is that in January 2018, they actually closed their Series B funding, and they've got annual revenues of over 15 million and 175,000 annual transactions. Now, I'd like to welcome both Alexis and Emilios to the stage. Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, thank you all for being here. Usually when you hear the word insurance, they run to the exit. So it's good to have you here.
Alexis and Emilios, it'd be great if you could just do an introduction. I know I covered quite a bit about Hellas Direct, but just in terms of your story before I go into the...
We used to have black hair many, many years ago. So we're both from Cyprus. We spent about 20 years of our lives in London and in New York. Both in financial markets. We met when we were both at Goldman's. We reached a stage in our lives, kind of mid-30s, that we wanted to do our own thing. We kind of had discussions in cafeterias and in parties what that thing would be, ranging from a coffee shop all the way to helping friends start their own businesses. We always had a passion for financial services. I'm an actuary by training. I've always done insurance in my life, so I had to convince Alexis that insurance is quite a cool thing to do. If it's good for Warren Buffett, it's good for everyone. So we spent about a couple of years in the region, not just Greece, Balkans, Turkey, and so on. And a couple of things kind of popped out of the page. The first one was there was no obvious direct player in the region. There was no new digital player. The financial crisis that hit London and New York was about to hit that part of the world again. And from our perspective, we took a decision to go and start a new insurance company in Greece.
So I used to have more hair when we started. I think doing business in Greece is an interesting topic for discussion and something that we talked with a few of you downstairs over coffee. I think it was a very interesting timing of entry into the Greek market. Our first investor deck, in the first slide, we had broken eggs, and the actual title was Greece is fucked. Sorry for the French. But, and I think for us, it was always a contrarian kind of entry. So we saw that there's a market in dislocation. There's a market that will need new talent to come in, new capital to come in, and new ideas to come in. And this was back in 2011, 2012, so it was right before the IMF came into Greece. So I think timing-wise, in hindsight, we couldn't have timed it better. Insurance is counter-cyclical. A lot of people need insurance. They have to buy it by law. So you need to, if you give them a product which is better, cheaper, and with better service, people will respond positively to it. Yeah. I think what scares you when you look at it from the outside, and again, a discussion point that was discussed downstairs before, is that it's not the traditional thing that you would expect a venture capital firm to say. Yeah. So this morning you had a session with Chrysanthos and with Nikos Bonatzos. those guys are not looking for opportunities in Greece. It's by exception that they will end up there. So when you think of doing a business in a market like Greece or any other blind spot market, I think that's quite challenging to get over the hurdle of this is not sexy, is not something that everybody's talking about. And most VCs will think that you're totally nuts. So I think just by way of introduction, I think that was something that definitely stuck with us since then.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is a point that I want us to cover because, when a company, when you first build a company that's about to, be in longevity, you kind of look at it really from an internationalization point of view versus localization. So in fact, when you're seeking investment, most people will ask you, okay, which markets are you going to enter? I think with your case, you've kind of proven the opposite. So you've actually focused on a single market, and that is Greece. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because actually you've gone back and you've invested in that specific country.
I think two things. The first thing for us was that we did not invent the market. Insurance exists for the last 400 years, so we did not disrupt the business model per se. The market was there. It's still, even in the depths of the crisis, still a $2.5 billion market. So from our perspective, it was mostly kind of a delivery or challenging or disrupting an existing market. The second thing, people tend to forget that Greece is a country of 11 million people, and a lot of the markets that exist in Greece are quite big. Yes, they've shrunk. Yes, they've done funny things over the last 8 years, but those markets exist, and you can create huge companies. And you can compare Greece. The problem sometimes we even compare Greece to the US or the UK. Why don't we compare Greece to Czech Republic, to Slovenia, to those kind of places? Yeah. And sometimes when you look deep into a country like Greece, a couple of conclusions come up. Number one, size, $2.5 billion market, you cannot ignore it. Yeah. Margins. The Greek property market is more profitable than the entire London property market, insurance. So you can come here and play with 100 billion worth of insurance. You're not going to make money. In Greece, you play with a much smaller market. You can make money. So back to the question. I think the sad reality of entrepreneurs or startup guys, they kind of blinded by the lights of a Facebook or Silicon Valley, and we tend to forget what exists in our regions. We tend to forget the obvious plays. Okay? And also, we tend to be a bit harsh about our own country. Yeah.
I think it's a combination of two things. The first one is a breakup in the capital markets. So when you look at the US, it's very easy. It's easier than most other countries to go and get early stage angel money than later stage super angel, early VC, late VC, all the way to the growth guys and then IPO. When you look at Europe, and in particular Southeastern Europe, those funds do not exist. When we were setting up, all the equity funds that you saw earlier, they were not here. There was nobody there. So you had to go either to family offices, or you had to almost convince people that are not traditional investors in this kind of risky asset class to come and invest in you. The second one, as Emilios said before, is mentality. I think when you look at it from, I think overall Mediterraneans are very emotional as people. Italians are the same, Spanish are the same, even the Israelis. I think the difference that we have with the Israelis is that we tend to be quite pessimistic. So when things are down, we really get drawn down by it, as opposed to having a bit of a contrarian kind of attitude. Yeah. And as a result of that, when you speak to most entrepreneurs in Greece right now, most of them will say, I want to go out. I want to expand to other markets. And it's partly this, I want to get out as a mentality-driven thing. And partly because there was no real money coming into Greece. But to fix Greece, I think that's a bigger investor proposition than to get out of Greece and sell into Silicon Valley or anything like that.
So you mentioned mentality, the actual industry you're in. So what have been the actual key determinant factors of success for Hellas Direct throughout its various investments? Like if we were to look back.
I think we got I'll hit it off and then you can correct me. I think we hit a couple of macro trends in the right way. We were very lucky with the timing. We didn't expect the crisis to be as deep as it was, but we did expect that Greece would go through a rough time. We spotted a couple of other big macro trends. One of them was the vilification of financial services as a whole. Yeah. The Occupy Wall Street movement. People hate banks. I mean, when you look at Greece and Cyprus right now, they detest banks. So I think we spotted that in the right time. The consumer became much more digital. As a result, you have much more voice. You can voice your satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the product. So that was a trend that we actually got right. And the third one, I guess, is regulation, because we're in a very regulated business, similar to banking. Insurance is very regulated. And all the regulation is pushing in the direction of fairness, transparency, things that wasn't the norm before.
Yeah.
So from a macro perspective, I think we managed to get those trends right. Now, on the micro side, I think it's all about choosing the right people, putting the right amount of sweat in, getting lucky sometimes, screwing up less than not.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I think insurance, by definition, is a long-term business. I think if you're getting into insurance, there are no 3-5-year benchmarks. There are 10, 20-year benchmarks. Look at the brands that exist in insurance. They've been around for many, many years. And despite the efforts of Silicon Valley, they will still be there for many years. So by definition, when you enter into this kind of business, think long-term. Now, you have to be a little bit like Alexis, but also you have to focus on your own product in your early days. So in your first 3, 4, 5 years, where an international player can come and crash you, or the stupidity of a local player can totally, disrupt your own disruption, that didn't happen. Partly because locals were, less than they were occupied in non-performing loans, in demonstrations, stuff like that. So they kind of let us alone do our own thing, which is a blessing for a startup. You can focus on your product. You can sort of get your things, get your shit in a row before shit hits the fan. The bigger picture, though, the foreigners don't give a damn about Greece, and which is actually a blessing, because Harvey started our own company in Berlin and go against Allianz in their backyard, or Generali in Italy. And that's something we do have a problem with Greek startups. To be arrogant enough to go to Berlin and say, I'm going to kick Allianz, that's a bit of a problem. Now, in Greece, in markets like Greece, Allianz is not the same. It's got its second or third tier people. They don't get the support they need from the headquarters. Their tech team are not as sort of brilliant as they are in China or Brazil and so on. So there's a bit of a blind spot. So if you put everything together, partly, God's help and timing and so on, but partly focusing on the product at the right time, you can get going.
Absolutely. Alexis, you mentioned before about the micro kind of elements, and I'd like us to talk about founders, as in yourselves, but also the talent that you brought on board. So I think it's quite impressive. You used to work together at Goldman Sachs, if I'm correct, and that's how kind of the idea came to place. What have been, I guess, the personal challenges maybe along the way, particularly as there's always that concept of, the buddying kind of entrepreneurs who one ends up leaving, etc. I guess you've both stuck to it, but it'd be interesting to hear your story in terms of that.
I think for us it was, we never actually worked together. We were a part of the same company. We met for lunch every now and then. I think we were both at the right phase of our lives, where we both were going through the soul searching of what do I want to do? Do I want to start something on my own? Do I want to change jobs and all that stuff? And I think we just synced at the right time. We had both invested in different startups, so friends of ours. Some did better than others. So I think we started seeing some first traction from an idea of 2 people, and then suddenly you have a team of 10 people, 15, 20, and then you can see that it can work. And I think at some point in time, the financial crisis definitely helped, because you could see that your normal career path was probably going to be disrupted at some point, one way or another. So I think for the 2 of us, it was probably, that was definitely helpful in getting together. The fundraising effort was quite difficult, because as an insurance company, you need to raise a lot of money up front. Our first round was $8.5 million, and that took us about a year and a half to close after we left our jobs. And at the time, it was at the time that the Icelandic volcano blew up. I don't know if you remember that, but we were stuck in a lot of airports waiting for EasyJet to go to different countries to beg for money. So we got to know each other quite well, and I think going through that humbling experience in the beginning is definitely helpful. Yeah. Now, coming to the talent, I think we've got a slightly different attitude than most people in Greece that believe that we have a very strong engineering base. I think we have some good engineers, but compared to other markets and other countries, I think our engineers need a lot of work to become much more work and practically focused. Our engineering team is actually based in Cyprus. We typically get them from Imperial, Oxford, Cambridge here, and we ship them over. So I think on the talent side, there is good talent, but there's a lot of unemployment, but you have to train them well, and you need to spend a lot of time finding the good people. So when you look at our culture as a company, we spend a lot of time up front trying to hire the right people, and then if things don't work out, we try to be disciplined with ourselves to part ways for both sides' sake quite early.
Yeah. And I guess getting talent now is much easier because you've got that financial capacity. But I guess at the beginning, when that may have not been the case, how could you attract the talent? Because of course there is that perception that Greece has amazing tech talent, when in fact, I mean, Laura and I have spent 6 months trying to find one person, and only now have we managed to, because we're pre-seed. But how did you go about with it? I mean, you said that you attract them from Oxford Imperial.
Yeah, I think in the beginning, you cannot attract someone because of money or promises and so on. I think it has to be the idea why you exist and so on. For us, yes, we were well-funded, but at the same time, we're an insurance company. Why would someone come and work for an insurance company? So I think, again, for the lack of a better word or a better cliche, I think people come to you because of the why, as opposed to, I was selling insurance. So, you have to, and I think the reason people it's easier to hire people now than 5 years ago is because they've seen this Hellas Direct family idea, dogma, taking off. And I think people are now much more sort of eager to join it. But if you really ask someone, certainly from our engineering team, you really work for an insurance company, don't you? They will probably deny it. And I think that's the gist of it. And again, every single tech company, if you break it down to individual sort of bits and pieces, it's just boring electrons. But it's what the founders and what the family around the founders will make out of it. Now,
and I guess that makes part of your culture as well, and that's how you retain your...
And the only thing that we did right, lots of mistakes, but I think the only thing we did put right, we did not bring the organogram or the organization structure of a Goldman, sort of an alliance, into Hellas Direct. And that's one of the big mistakes that people make. You start a company, you bring your best buddies, define boxes, and then just dump people in boxes. That doesn't work. And people evolve into roles. Usually you hire people that are far more junior to begin with, and then suddenly they land like a big job, and they're the COO of a big company within 2 years. So I think that one, you have to almost kind of train people, get people sort of up to speed quite quickly. And thank God we were flexible enough not to sort of force people into roles. Even our roles are not. We kind of grew up in a world like Goldman's where you always had co-heads. You always had even co-CEOs. And that blended quite well with the emerging financial institution regulation, 4I principle, making sure that there's good checks. But at the same time, it's very hard to start organizations and say, okay, you do this, I do that, and that's it. And similarly with every single person you hire. And that has to change quite quickly.
So we briefly spoke about this outside as well, but what are your expansion plans moving forward? So will you be focusing again on Greece, but on a different kind of vertical, or are you thinking of...
I think we're exactly at the right pivot point right now where we have to decide what we're going to do next. Greece is an interesting opportunity for us. We're still tiny. We're 1.5% to 2% of the market share. So we have a lot of room to grow, for sure. So we could turn into a 150 million revenue company just from Greece alone, just from insurance alone. That being said, because the banks are where they are right now, and because competitors of ours don't necessarily look at the broader ecosystem, there's opportunities to tap into more bank-like services, whether it's short-term lending for somebody who had a car breakdown, for example, or somebody who needs to fix their home and is already a client of ours in home insurance, that you may provide them with the whole network of plumbers, and you can make lead generation economics. There's a lot of stuff you can do around insurance. So in the mobility ecosystem and the housing ecosystem, there's a lot of touch points. Greece is definitely our base, and we want to keep growing, and we want to have significant or critical mass in that one. That being said, the reason why we got the IFC, the World Bank, as an investor earlier in the year, is to start looking at other markets that are similar to Greece. The only request that we had is give us 12 to 18 months at least to make sure that we stand on our own 2 feet in the Greek market before we start thinking about, is it Saudi women drivers, or is it Nigeria, or is it whatever it is. I think from our perspective, Cyprus is a bit of a case study. On the one hand, it's small enough that it can be a bit of a sandbox for international expansion. At the same time, we're from there, we have people there, so it's a known, unknown entity. So I think on that one, it's, we've expanded to Cyprus recently. We're beginning to see some very positive trends. And the challenge for us is how quickly do you make the leap and start looking at the Balkans or the Middle East.
Yeah. Have you got anything else to add?
Yeah, I think for us, the good thing about insurance, we are a regulated business, and you have to keep your feet on the ground. You cannot just wake up one day and say, hey, we're off to Sweden. That would have been a taxi company. That would have been a social media company. For us, it has to be a cash-focused or bottom-line focused kind of expansion. Now, when you look at the world of fintech and expansion, there are obvious gaps. I think, as Alexis said earlier, the IFC is helping us a lot to split up the world into smaller worlds. We are 100% certain that fintech, and especially insurtech, will not be a global domination. Had it been a global domination, Warren Buffett would have already been in Greece, and Alibaba would have been also in Greece. But it's not the case. It's highly regional. Plus, the big boys, they are usually occupied by the big markets. So as we are kind of finding our 2 feet now and becoming sort of a cash flow positive company in Greece, and we adopt traditional economics, not pounds per click or having ridiculous valuations just because you smile really well. I think you will end up sort of looking at areas or countries where they have a combination of big boys are not there. Mm-hmm. They are similar to Greece. They are in the 10 to 15 million kind of country level, big enough to sustain life, but not humongous. So Allianz is already there. And thirdly, the IFC already has an investment there, either in the form of a bank or in the form of a telco. And again, we don't kid ourselves that unless you have a local partner, or we could go to Saudi tomorrow with a local partner, but you wouldn't go on your own, 2 guys from Cyprus, raising a flag and saying, we're here.
So we've looked at things mostly from an individual perspective, and I'd like us to touch a bit about the institutional level, and that is the actual Greek startup ecosystem. Mm-hmm. So of course, you've created a business in Greece. My question here is, what changes do you think need to be made in order for the Greek ecosystem to be able to create but also sustain companies that are built to last?
I think the first one is sometimes we're being too cynical or too crude and aggressive against the ecosystem in Greece. It's a very young ecosystem, right? The concept of entrepreneurship didn't really exist. I mean, the fact that Markos Veremis, who was sitting here before, is probably the first of the next generation of entrepreneurs in 40 years is probably one indication of that. I think there will be a lot of money burnt and a lot of money lost from the funds that were just raised, just because you need that activation energy in any ecosystem to do well going forward. It was the same with Silicon Valley in the 50s, it was the same with Israel, it was the same with Berlin. So I think on this one, we tend to be quite cynical about it, that too many events, too many speeches, everybody's hyping that we're going to get crazy valuations and all that. But I think in reality, you need to go through this phase until you mature as an ecosystem. When you look at more advanced systems, the networks work much better. Networks being whether it's capital networks or whether it's mentorship or whether it's talent networks to be able to find people and this mobility of talent around. That we haven't really experienced in Greece, partly because of the brain drain. A lot of people left Greece, came here. So I think a lot of that needs to reverse. And that has a lot to do with the stability of the financial and the socioeconomic environment in Greece. Yeah. So we're quite optimistic about it long term. I just think that for now there's a lot of hype, and you need to sometimes be a bit more realistic. But I wouldn't be too cynical about it, because we are in early stage of that development. So it's not, it's a natural thing to go through.
Again, we're optimists by nature. So I think we have to decide, Greece can either become like a series of flukes or random events. And any country can have random events. And by those random events, it means that you're going to have good companies. Who would have thought that in digital mobile marketing would be a couple of Greek companies doing it? Super successful one and super failure one. Then again, you might have another company doing something amazing in taxis or in food distribution and so on. But again, these are the first steps of randomness, of someone somewhere in Yeragas did something and that's it. It could have been any kind of place anywhere on the planet. In order to put a systemic thing around it, I think we strongly feel that you have to start from Greece. Otherwise, it's going to be just flukes. Yeah. Just amazing talent. Who knows? Somebody right now in Greece is thinking about Thailand or Indonesia, and suddenly something happens. But that's not an ecosystem. And I think in order to get it sorted out, start with the country. Yeah. Take the 2-3 sectors that are in desperate need to apply stuff. Stop with this stupidity of Greece is too small and I have to do my pilot in Greece and I will open my wings abroad. That's not going to happen. Make sure you start a company that generates cash. It stabilizes your business, and then go and conquer the world. Now, I think we're missing 2 things. sector focus. We have to say, okay, what are we good at? You know, and every time we probably meet 100 startups a year over coffees and so on, ranging from fish farms all the way to pizza places and insurance and so on. It's chaotic. So we need to make sure that we can somehow focus that one, either around success stories or around some kind of mentorship or whatever. The second thing, I think, is like believe in Greece. I mean, somebody have to stand up and say, you know what, guys, in Czech Republic, there were 2 billionaires in insurance alone. How different is Czech Republic from Greece, right? When you ask somebody in Greece, is insurance a good sector? It's like, no, get out, go and do it somewhere else. So again, now we need to have to force ourselves, and perhaps the funds can do a good job now that they're up and running, to kind of put a systemic twist, systemic spin around all these sort of chaotic events. But again, being an eternal optimist, it's fine to do either. It's okay. We're probably the first guys to say, guys, chapeau for someone in Gifisia who conquered Silicon Valley. We don't mind that.
Yeah.
Chances of that happening, pretty slim.
Alex and Emilios, thank you so much. I will open the discussion now to the audience as well. I'm sure they've got plenty. Any questions for both Emilios and Alexis, particularly, if you are looking to start your own business or even if you have set something up in Greece?
Hi, John Kikadis here. Can you talk about how insurance might look like in 5 or 10 years, and maybe you can touch upon big data, what kind of impact it can have in insurance? Thank you.
We're talking about Greece or we're talking about global?
Greece, let's start with Greece.
Yeah. Okay.
You start.
I think Greece, it will have an impact for sure. And usually insurance, the impact tends to be slower than what people predict. And if you split that impact into 2 parts, life, non-life. On the non-life side of things, it's already having an impact. So in non-life, when we talk about cars, travel, basic things that the consumer is doing, big data will do 3 things. Number 1, it will simplify the product, commoditize the product. Alibaba launched their own insurance company called Zhong'an. The product is extremely simple. It's embedded in everything they do. So product will change substantially. Number 2, the way that product will be distributed, it will find itself in everything you do, in your mobile phone, even embedded in your credit cards or wallets and so on. The third thing, you will have a massive consolidation of people in the non-life space. So you're not going to have 20, 30 companies that you have right now in Greece. Probably it's going to be 5 of them. And maybe you're going to have companies which are outside the spectrum of insurance coming in. So you may have retailers, telcos, and so on. Now, on the life side, that's going to be significantly longer. And people started talking about lifestyle, started talking about things like vitality, improving your life before you die, more or less. That's not insurance, really. That's probably going to be first met by or kind of improved by everyone else. Science, medicine, lifestyle living, and so on. And insurance will just be the end result of that. We are big fans of our Vitality, amazing company. I think what these guys have achieved was I want you to be a healthy human being. That's not insurance. That's effectively, I want you to be a really good human being. And in case you die, don't worry, I'm here. So I think that one, back to your question, non-life will be a much, much more aggressive change. And on the life side of things, probably you have to look outside insurance before you see big data coming in.
I think we've got one more question. Yeah, go for it.
It's a very challenging tax and legal environment in Greece. With a very challenging tax and legal environment in Greece, have you ever thought about leaving Greece and go and set up your company somewhere else? By way of experience, I work at BlackRock, and before that I was Morgan Stanley, and in both companies we tend not to invest at all in Greece, or the investment is really minor. And I was thinking, is there an exit plan for you?
I think for us, we chose the regulated sector in Greece for that exact reason, because the rules are pan-European, and however much the local regulators, they think they control the game, it's really a pan-European flat regulation kind of space to operate in. Now, on the taxes side, when you look at us, when you think about the high-end talent that we hire, whether it's on the software development side or the quant side, the PhDs and those kind of people, most of them are based in Cyprus. And one of the reasons is that the social security tax in Greece is 32%, and then in Cyprus is 8.1%. So I think on that one, obviously, there's a cost advantage. So I think it is more the stability rather than the level. I mean, the US is quite high tax as well, but at the same time, you have stability. And I think that's what's missing right now in Greece. But to your point, we knew what we were getting into. We would probably never get into a non-regulated sector in Greece.
One last question? Yeah.
Thank you, and congratulations, guys, on your business. I'm Emilios. To what extent do you think that the fact that you didn't talk kind of the hyper-growth talk that most of the VCs want to hear and most of the startups talk about nowadays affected your, contributed to your funding difficulties, if that's the case? And what advice can you give in that respect to founders or entrepreneurs who would like to start their own businesses in a sector that's not necessarily going to create the next Facebook?
Okay, so I'll start with it. I think VCs have no idea about insurance. They are totally useless about insurance. And VCs are doing an amazing job in certain sectors, but when it comes to insurance or even fintech, they have absolutely no fucking idea. And I've told them in their face. They're going to burn a lot of money, and frankly, the big boys in insurance are the reinsurance guys. And and even sort of those guys with a $1 trillion+ balance sheet, they do get things wrong. What they expect from you is two things. Build a product. They want to see the product. They want to see unit economics. They want to see profitability. They don't care about your product. And frankly, if you go there with a hugely exaggerated plan, you get smacked and you get kicked out. So unlike a VC, who probably is going to give you 100 million before kicking you out. The second thing they expect from you is to have the ability in 3 to 5 years to be truly scalable. And again, VCs will come to you with a quarterly or like a daily plan. I've been in insurance for 20 years. That's never happening. And the sad reality about VCs, and again, they've done amazing stuff. Don't get me wrong. They're brilliant people. But when it comes to certain sectors, they're just being naive. They're little kids. They threw 100 million at Lemonade and asked Lemonade to go and kill Warren Buffett. Okay? If you want to kill Warren Buffett, give him 20 billion, and then you're going to talk about it. So there's a lot of stupidity. And fintech, Lemonade, as a Revolut, one of our partners, amazing guys. They're building a good product. They will burn a lot of money. They will get smacked around. And when HSBC wakes up, you're going to see some show there. So back to your question. Focus on building a business. How would your granddad build a business? Had it been a real business with cash flows, with cucumbers and stuff like that, what could your grandfather do? By showing your grandmother wonderful projections, it doesn't bring food to the table. So, and especially when you are in a sector where the big boys are really big. And again, the VCs never had that experience in their lives.
This one, VCs tend to think in cycles, and they go after fads, especially the more consumer-focused ones. Maybe some of the B2B ones are different. But when you actually look at what their LPs want, which is the guys giving them the money, they want to hear the sexiest thing coming up, whether it's Web 2.0, whether it's social, whether it's whatever the next phase is. Our advice to anybody wanting to start the business is just stick to one sector and stick with it, as opposed to trying to follow the next trend. Because if you follow the next trend, you may get it right, and suddenly within 2 years you flip your company, you're multi-billionaire. But at the same time, chances are that that's not going to happen. If you stick to one sector, you build a lot of. I don't know if you read Malcolm Gladwell's Blink, but there's 10,000 hours that you need to put into it. You almost need that. In our experience, when we started fundraising, there was no VC that was interested in talking about this because it's a heavy capital-based company. I don't know if Nikos Bonazos is in the room, but he told us in the last 2 years they invested in 3 insurance companies, including Lemonade and Metromile and Oscar. So I think on that one, VCs change. We became quite sexy for Google Ventures to reach out to us 3 years ago, At the same time, they hated the idea of investing something in Greece, to your point before. So I think when you start looking at that, if you remove how good it feels to say, hey, I'm backed by Sequoia, other than that, I would not focus too much about, I'm looking for the VC investor. I would focus on, does this business make sense? And do I get passion? And do I enjoy being in this sector for the next 10 years? And at some point, the cycle will turn around. So I wouldn't worry too much about what the VCs are after.
Alex and Emilios, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
guys. Thank you.